Ruby, come here. I got food for you. Come here. Hey, what's up, guys? What's up, everybody? Guys and gals, I should say. Isn't it funny? Everyone used that term guys. Even if there's a bunch of girls in front of them, they say, hey, guys, come over here. And women just take it. I don't know. One time I did that at an event where I was in Washington, D.C., and some woman said, I don't see any guys here. I mean, she like called that out. I was like, oh, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. And these are things as men we never think about, right? Men, these white, privileged pricks like myself that we never think about the other, just seriously. I mean, guilty as charged, right? This is just some dog food for the dog. I'm not cooking anything right now. But the dog gets it gets like this fresh food, and then I mix it up with some of her kibble. But it's really good. Yeah, anyway, yeah, somebody says this, I guess only people that are sort of, super feminized, and it's okay. Listen, there's no right or wrong way to be. But obviously some people are super sensitive about pronouns and gender, and not to disparage that. I mean, I understand if I were non-binary and somebody called me he or she, I'd probably be like, dude. So that's fair enough, right? The key is to be respectful to others, as we always try to be here. But I think the difference is militancy. Some people eat a vegan diet. I eat mostly a vegan diet. But if I sat here and preached about it 24/7, I'd have no followers, right? Because people are like, damn, I'm just tired of listening to this. And same thing when it comes to, gender and ideology, those types of things. I think people are willing to be respectful of it and try to be caring and kind. But man, when you're like cramming it down their throat and trying to get them to celebrate it, right? The difference between respect and celebration. And I think that's where some people draw the line. And I don't know why I talk about shit like this. Why do certain things pop into my head and I talk about stuff? I mean, I'm talking, you guys must think I'm crazy. I am definitely ADD. But yeah, respect goes with, hey, Dark, exactly. Hey, Suze, how you doing? It's so nice for people who contribute. Thank you, Suze, for doing that. And if you don't know, if you contribute, if you become a member of one of these TikTok people's stuff lives, it's like, for me, it's like $6.99. You get a little moniker next to your name. It says Chip. I don't know why they set up anyway. So people with the name Chip next to them are people who have given some money, which, by the way, thank you so much for doing that. But if you don't know, and this is the caveat, not that I don't appreciate every penny that I can get in donations, thank you. But TikTok has the business model where TikTok keeps 7 out of every $10. That's 70% for those of you who failed math class. That's a lot, right? You think 50-50 maybe, maybe 60, whatever. 70, it's like, So if you ever do want to help out, which I genuinely appreciate, I'm not trying to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. If you can't, don't. But if you can and you want, there's a link in my bio that says Linktree, Chip Barnes, and towards the bottom of those links, there's a number of easy ways to do it. All the major, things like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, Zelle, and then of course Patreon, which is the Patreon page. I'm working on that today, by the way. My Patreon, before today's over, I swear it's going to have additional tiers. It's my mission in life today. Anyway, and then what I'm going to do for those of you, if you're a regular here, you probably know my shtick, but I'm going to be figuring out ways. I've been brainstorming ways to kind of make this work so I can keep doing it. But what I want to do is let the audience, just like I talked about the cooperative business types where everyone gets a democratic say. It's very much how I want to do things in the rest of my life. And same thing with me trying to figure out how to make this work. I want to ask the audience, hey, how do you want me to do this? You tell me how to do it. I have a bunch of ideas. But I'll throw them out there. Maybe somebody else will have different ones. I hope they do. And but I'm gonna make not right now. We're gonna schedule a separate live for that. If people want to come, they can. If they don't, understood. It's a whole different thing. It's not me talking about politics. This is talking about how do I survive as a content creator, which is a whole different story. And by the way, hopefully, if we come up with things that are really creative and interesting, we can help other content creators use those same things we create, right? So that'd be kind of cool. 70% is high. I think. I think it's pretty high. But anyway, so happy Saturday to everybody. I hope you're doing really well. As always, I was on a live. I'm always on people's lives. I don't know if you ever surf around and check out someone's live who I really enjoy is a guy named SoCal Smitty. SoCal, like Southern California, Smitty, S-M-I. And he always has a good panel. And he runs a really good live. I think there was like 700 people on it when I was on there. And he's always nice to let me in at some point. I got a chance to speak a little bit, but there was somebody claiming on the live, and this is no joke, and she seemed like a pretty decent person, by the way. She wasn't one of these folks who steps on people and interrupts. She wasn't rude. And she was, to that extent, she was a more moderate Israeli. So she's sort of down the middle. She doesn't like the right government and stuff like that, which I think a lot of people feel that way, believe it or not. But they're also for their security. I understand that too. But what she was saying is that, the people who are being held by the H group are getting barely a half of a pita bread per day. for food. And meanwhile, they're the quote unquote, T words that are in Israeli jails are getting 3 nice meals a day and being treated kindly. And I was like, yo, that is not the truth. So one of the guests there named Polly Nada, N-A-D, Nada for short, she put a picture up on her little square box that showed, and I don't know if you've seen this, I did a video about this too, a Palestinian prisoner who they showed a before picture and then an after picture. It was only 90 days later, 3 months. And oh my God, the guy looked like he'd been through one of these camps back in World War II. I kid you not. He looked horrible. He looked like he hadn't been fed at all the entire time. And he looked like he was, on death's door. And I did a whole video about the experience of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. If you go back, I think it's like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is, you got to scroll back to see it, but it says, Israeli prisons are hell on earth, or something like that. That was the title. So if you go back and search for that one, you'll see that in the video, I spliced in a prisoner who just got released by the Israelis, and he just speaks about what's going on and how many other people are still there and all the stuff like that. Did I get a concussion? No, I was playing with my dog, and well, people might argue that I have a permanent concussion, which is why I'm strange. But up here, the dog and I were playing. This happened one time before. I don't know if you remember, I had one by my eye. And I should have learned my lesson, but she likes to nip when she comes up to grab something. And she nipped, and we just kind of hit each other. So, second time. Hopefully it won't happen a third time where I'm a fool for continuing to do that kind of play, right? But no, she's a lot of fun. We were out, I don't know if you saw yesterday, I did a live, which, by the way, I haven't uploaded yesterday's lives yet. There's one in the late afternoon, which was like 30 minutes. And then there's another one that went on last night for about 3 hours. So they'll be up this afternoon. But during the first one, I was out in the woods with Ruby, the dog that I live with, and she's a 4-year-old coonhound, and so she loves chasing deer more than anything in the world. So I took her out to this park where there's beautiful woods and it's snowy, and we were running around, and she was just howling at deer. It's called a coonhound. Hey Ruby, you want some food? Let me put her food in the microwave real quick. She'll come running over once she hears this. She's at the window barking at passing dogs. But, she's very calm and very docile most of the time. Like at home, she's, quiet as can be. But as soon as she sees other critters, she goes crazy. Whether it be a groundhog or I'll tell you, raccoons especially, and she's called a coon hound. I'm guessing short for raccoon. One time I was walking her, and there was these 2 raccoons in somebody's yard climbing a tree, and she went berserk, man. Oh no, somebody says I slipped and fell in my bathtub playing with my cat. I'm sorry to hear that. That bathtub injury, by the way, you can really hurt yourself if you fall in a bathtub. Well, thank you, Stavros. At Mellow Bello, listen, if somebody says, Chip tells the truth, I don't have, no one has a barometer on the truth, right? So everyone has a version of their interpretation. But I do like to try to point out this is something that people have heard me say a lot, and I'll get back to the dog. There's something what I call biophysical reality, like what actually happened. Like, you could say that, somebody left their home, right? Somebody physically ran away from their house. Somebody can say they left voluntarily. Somebody can say, I left because someone was pointing a gun at me. But what happened was there were people with guns and somebody ran. That's what happened. And then you have stories around what happened. So my version of what I share with you is simply my interpretation of to the best of my ability to objectively parse through the stories, as well as what I think actually happened, and then try to share back stuff with the audience. And I do my best to do that. I don't always get it right. And it's funny, sometimes I'll say things that are wrong, which is fine, and someone will correct me, which is fine. So, and that's why I always want to listen to more people. I went to the pro-Israel rally, by the way, if you're like about a month and a half ago. People are like, why in the hell would you go to a pro-Israel rally? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? I don't go there because I'm going to hold up blue and white pom-poms. I go there so I can see what people are thinking, see what people are saying. I listen to what the politicians said on the stage. I wanted to throw up. It reminds me, do I have high blood pressure? No, I don't have high blood pressure. Just to let you know, as far as blood pressure, I'm getting back to the dog. I haven't lost it yet. But high blood pressure. My blood pressure is so low, they worry about me sometimes because, my heartbeat, because I've exercised my whole life and I've done really, almost like, they say the Olympians are the ones that have the lowest heartbeat, resting heartbeat, but mine's not too far off. So no, I don't have high blood pressure. That usually comes, by the way, just so you know, from your arterial system having constrictions, and therefore your heart has to pump harder and faster. Therefore, you have higher blood pressure. So normally, if you don't eat a lot of greasy, grimy animal products, and you don't, you can see it too, and it's the thoracic stuff in the fat that causes your problem. Anyway, we call it visceral fat. Anyway, back to the dog. So I'm going to be taking the dog out again sometime. I have to feed the dog and feed the cats, and then we're going to go out for a little bit of a jaunt. But remember, there's no such thing as anybody who's, quote, the truth. Don't listen to anything I say. Verify it yourself. And that's okay. Anybody who is worth their salt would have no problem with you double checking them because, whatever. And that's that. So yeah, just for those of you who are wondering, this is a bump on my head from the dog and I playing. It's nothing. There wasn't a Mossad crew that came and jumped me, or there wasn't a bunch of flag waving Israelis that tackled me the other day or anything like that. No, thankfully. Anyway, so in terms of things we talk about here, we talk about a lot of stuff. Do me a favor, if you're new here and you've never ever seen this person with this thing on their head before, can you type the number 1 in the chat? Because I want to see if I have anybody new. If you're wondering where you can see evidence, I'm not sure what you were talking about there. I'm always interested in more stuff. If somebody, okay, Cock, how you doing? Nice to see you. Yeah, somebody says you seem gentle, but I just see life differently. Hey, that's okay, Mello. That's okay. That's fine. Listen, my view is my view, just like yours is yours, and there's a reason why it happens. It's because, hello, Nahid. Welcome here. We have, different backgrounds, different political parents and culture and church and school or synagogue or whatever it may be. And we're shaped by all those things, right? The media we see, the people we're exposed to, the places we visit, and all of that forms both a worldview, and then on each issue you have a specific take, I like to say. And it doesn't make you wrong and me right because we have different takes. It just means that we see them from different vantage points based on the experiences we've had so far, right? And the good news is if somebody's an open-minded critical thinker, which I hope you are too, Mello, as we encounter new information, we can hopefully, shift and modify our takes on subjects accordingly. The thing that gets a little scary is when we really like our take and we want to keep our take going, so we look for things that reinforce our take, right? That's the problem. And that happens, that's called an echo chamber or confirmation bias. And so therefore, there are a lot of people that do that, especially on this left-right thing. They'll go into a room that hates Donald Trump, and they'll just go, yeah, they'll just bash the guy, 91 counts. And it's really just an exercise in futility. Because if you already know the things you know, why hear more of them and hear them again? It doesn't make any sense. You should want to learn things to challenge, hopefully challenge your point of view. And then if you can affirm it through challenging it, that's even better, right? That's why I went to the pro-Israel rally, that kind of stuff. So I try to do that. If we do have guests in the queue, thank you for being patient. I am going to bring you up. I'm not ignoring you. I just have to cover a couple quick pieces of general stuff. So thank you for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. They say that the new currency is attention. In terms, that's what Gary Vaynerchuk says. So thank you today for giving me some of your attention, because I really appreciate it. It's funny. I tell this story and it's true. I swear, and people don't believe me, but I swear to God, I have a counselor that I see once a month from the VA. And so I was very, very reluctant to get on social media, like to talk in front of the camera. Because I don't know, you just have it's like anything else in life. Anything you haven't done before, you have like a fear of the unknown. And so I had a fear of the unknown. It's true. And so finally my counselor, after hearing me talk about this 3 months in a row, he's like, listen, just go grab a camera, start talking, and if nobody watches, you'll know right away. And so I did, thanks to him. His name is Michael, and I owe Michael a debt of gratitude for that. So, excuse me, just one sec. So yeah, and I started a little over 3 months ago. So that was, it's a good thing. So I'm really glad about that. What am I talking about, Zizo? We're talking about people's perspectives and the fact that nobody's perspective is necessarily absolute. So in terms of critical thinking, I would hope that everybody who cares about, knowing what can be as close to the truth as possible, maintains an open mind and is open to new information. I can tell you this, from having done this way, anytime I listen to somebody with whom I disagree, I almost always learn something new, whether it's about how somebody else thinks about something or whether it's something within the bounds of the knowledge base. It's just good to listen, right? Listening is, what do they say? It's better to listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's better to use them in that proportion. And I agree with that. So that's what I try to do. If you're new here, I'm a veteran. I'm an Army vet. My name is Chip Barnes. I'm from the eastern seaboard of the U.S. Lived here most of my life, served in the military back in the late 80s, learned about the Israeli-Palestine issue back in 1989, which is a little over 34 years ago. And just by chance, one of my classmates happened to give a presentation on something called the First Intifada, which was a big uprising in 1987 among the Palestinians because of the ongoing occupation and the lack of any progress with respect to peace or establishment of a Palestinian state. And if you're under oppression, like most people, it's pretty normal to not like it, right? Pretty normal. So that's why there's resistance. And that's why, again, we saw what happened on the 7th. I'm not trying to put a value judgment on it. I'm just saying it's normal for people that are under occupation and under siege to not like it and to want to do something about it, right? Makes sense, right? So just because I take the point of view of trying to defend the oppressed, not the oppressor. That's sort of my thing in life. If I look at other issues, like I say, this could be Ethiopians oppressing Eritreans, and I'd feel the same way against the Ethiopian oppression, and I would understand the Eritrean resistance, right? It has nothing to do with Jews, Palestinians. Those are irrelevant in my book. So it's about the power dynamic. So I do geopolitical analysis, and some people find it good, some people can't stand my point of view or whatever, and that's fine too. And by the way, if you disagree, the only difference between me and many people here on TikTok, I think this is something that is notable, is that I do listen to people who disagree with me, because I think that's the fair thing to do. I would want someone to give me the time of day. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring up some guests, and I'm going to keep talking for another few seconds here. But I want to let you know that if you do disagree with my point of view, which is, I tend to lean on the side of defending the Palestinians' right to resist, and I critique and condemn the Israeli occupation, its atrocities, as well as what it's been doing, of course, in Gaza. But it's blockade outright. And the behavior by various governments. Unfortunately, it's not just the more hard right governments that what they're doing now, which is the worst of the behavior. But if you trace the history of the conflict, if you look at this thing with an honest eye for 30, I could only read books about this back in the day. We didn't have an internet. We didn't have cell phones. I know some people who are younger, like, what? Yeah, there was life before cell phones, so you had to read books. And something about reading books, you remember it more. I don't know what it is about that. Like, you physically have a book in your hand, it just becomes part of you. Just like when you write stuff down, there's something about that. So I learned a lot about it. And so I read, authors like Norman Finkelstein and Ilya Pape and others who have written amazingly skilled, detailed, precise books about the history of the conflict. And I think once you do that, it's hard to unknow something once you know it. And many people just don't have that exposure. So if you do come up and speak, the one thing I want to tell you is you will be given the time of day. I'll be respectful to you. I won't cut you off. I won't mute you. I won't be mean to you. However, at some point, if you're saying 7 or 8 things, I will stop you if I can't get you to stop by politely trying to. I might mute you then just so I can address some of the litany of things being raised. But that's my promise to you. And that's the real difference between the way that I operate my lives and most other people that have these shouting matches, which devolve into absurdity, right? And you can't hear what anybody's saying. So I like to say you can never have consensus when you talk past people. You have to talk with people. And so that's what I really try to do. And if you agree to disagree at the end of the conversation, you can still be civil. That's the point I try to bring up. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring up our first guest here. And thanks for being patient. I really appreciate it. Let me see. This is Samaya Jia. I can't remember the rest. Samaya somebody or other. Hello. I think I unmuted you. Are you?
Oh,
There you go.
yeah, good morning. Hope how you doing?
Good.
Today's subject is the same thing, I don't know where to speak for. Anyway, my name is Samia Jamal. I'm Palestinian living in the USA. Going through this every single day, it's really drained our energy. About what they've been saying lately, we want two-state solution. And they keep repeating that lately, and they know that it's never going to happen. They know that, when it, in the end now, Netanyahu is talking about two-state solution after all this catastrophe and slaughtering and and I don't know if I'm allowed to speak, but what Netanyahu is trying to do, he's trying to cover, buy time as much as he could for his own personal reason. Two-state solution, I don't think it would ever work because of Jerusalem. If they divided no matter what, and wide or lengthwise or whatever, Jerusalem is always going to be a problem. So yesterday I was in a TikTok and they were saying that if gonna do a two-state solution, Jerusalem is gonna be under the UN authorities that neither the Palestinian or the Israelis are going to be in Jerusalem. So what do you think about that?
Well, I know that the Netanyahu government has said they're going to maintain a permanent presence in Gaza indefinitely, they said, and that they want to have security throughout the entire territory going up to the Jordan River, which doesn't sound good. So, is that what you're asking in terms of that, or what do you think? What do you lean to as far as this two-state solution? Just to tell you real quick, I don't think either is possible at this point. I know that the H Group revised their charter in 2017, leaning towards the idea of pre-1967 borders being the establishment of a two-state solution. The problem are the settlements. There are 700,000 Israeli citizens that live in those settlements now. That's just an unthinkable number. And they've broken up and fragmented the territory to an extent that there's no way to have a contiguous territorial Palestinian state. It doesn't make sense to have like 85 separate villages that are torn apart by Israeli territories to somehow be a state. So they can't do a one-state solution from the Israeli perspective because there'll be an immediate Arab majority. And if they're going to maintain a democracy, which they then couldn't, they'd have to have an authoritarian, minority-driven government over top of people who are the majority, which again is South Africa, part two. So there's no way out through legitimate outcomes one or two at this point. There should be at this point a one-state solution with full rights for everybody. But even within Israel proper now, we know that people from Arab, non-Jewish descent do not have equal rights, even though they state it under the law. So I'm not sure. What do you think is going to happen?
I think that this is, even America's suggesting, oh, we have to talk about two-state solution. Even if they do, I don't think this is what people been sacrificing, all this for a two-state solution. And we know that Israel always gonna play the victim again and again and again and again. And the Arabs are, I don't know. They said even though they have a state, it's not gonna be a state, over another state. We just gonna, if you wanna call a state, go ahead, call it a state, but it would never. And at the same time, they have to they cannot, the state, if they do a state, Palestinian state, they have to have no weapons, like no police, no army, nothing. Like, they would be always the controlling one.
I agree. It's the challenges are so many and so high that I don't think it's going to be possible. Especially, this is the real problem. Let's face it. The United States, for many, many, many decades, has been backing Israel at every corner, every turn, and that makes it impossible politically and militarily for anything to be done to change the dynamics on the ground. So the thing I don't understand is why the U.S. hasn't exerted more pressure to stop the carnage that we're seeing in Gaza. I did not think it would take this drastic a turn as it has. So I think a lot of us are surprised who've been following this, just how extensively the response has been taken out on Gaza. It's unbelievable. And even senators from the United States who visited to see the procession of aid trucks being allowed into Gaza from the Rafah crossing were also just incredibly disappointed that the Israelis have limited the amount of aid that's allowed in on a daily basis. It's just, again, it's part of a broader sort of mindset of, completely starving and, unaliving as many Palestinians as possible. And again, trying to make them as miserable as possible so that all they'll want to do is leave. And that seems to be the plan. I can't say for sure that's what's in their heads, but that's what it seems like based on the actions that they've been carrying out, not just during this conflict, but prior to it for many decades. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. One more thing before I go. Egypt and Rafah has border, between Gaza and Egypt. They building an extra wall with wires, and it's 6 meters, or
Yeah.
I can't even remember. I just woke up and my mind is everywhere. What do you think they're planning for another border between Gaza and Egypt? We have a border already, and they're building a thicker wall, a bigger wall. Like what's their attention? You think about this wall?
Well, I think that the problem you have there is the former government under Mohamed Morsi probably would have been doing things much differently than under Al Sisi. If you don't know, there was a coup d'etat in Egypt, and there was a lot of protesting, and of course, then there was an overthrow of the Egyptian government. And the Egyptian government has been much more conciliatory towards American and Israeli foreign policy objectives than the previous government. And who knows how the whole thing got started? That's a whole other story. But if you don't know, as the person's saying, there's a 6 meter high wall reinforced with all sorts of concertina wire. There's photos of it you can find between Egypt and Gaza, and it's all part of the collusion, or I'd say the cooperation of certain Arab leaders by looking the other way. I'll tell you this: the citizens in Egypt, from what I've said, the pulse on the ground is they're dying to go in and stop this. But the government won't let them, and they can't even protest in public or they get arrested and thrown in jail. So that's the problem. The problem is not the people. The problem are the Arab governments, the leadership.
Okay, I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
Real quick.
Egypt is the closest neighbor to Gaza, and Jordan. These two countries are the closest border, but Gaza is right there next to Egypt. Jordan, you have the West Bank closer to them. For Egypt, like this past week, it was a lot of things going on. It was some people was armed between Egypt and Israelis, and they were shooting at each other. And I heard that it was a drug smuggling, but it didn't make sense because nobody is that stupid to go deal drugs between the borders at this attention. They know that their eyes are everywhere in that border. And it wasn't just Gaza, it was, far away from Gaza. So I don't know, what they trying to do, another ISIS and blame it on them. The Egyptian is shooting at us so they could start something. I really don't, it's getting so dark here that I know the people is pro-Palestinian. I, go live with them. I see, every Arabic or every human, forget about, where their background, that they see they overdid this. It's like nobody could take it more than we could. Our head is so, stuck in it. What's next? What's tomorrow? What else they gonna do? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for the points. I'll talk about that a little more, and we're going to let somebody else come up. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah, it's discouraging. Let's face it. It's very discouraging to see what's happening. Remember that there are plenty of people around the world. This is the good thing. Two good things. There are plenty of people who are Jewish, both in Israel and in the United States, that don't agree with the government of Israel, and two, are not in favor of maintaining the occupation and the blockade of Gaza. They do want security for the citizens of Israel. That makes perfect sense. And one of the big problems of this conflict is the Israelis are not simply providing for their own security, which is what their citizens believe for the most part, and those around the world who believe the narrative. They're going way beyond that, as we well know. And they've done a good job of hiding that reality from the public for many decades through the complicity of different Western media sources, especially in the United States. However, that's what's changing. And as horrible as this has been, and as the number of people that have died, it's unthinkably awful. However, the sacrifices made during this series of events has been in return for one thing that's never happened before, and that is a much broader projection of the issue to the public. More people know about this issue than ever before, are talking about it than ever before, are focused on it than ever before, and understand the barbarity and the indiscriminate mass, red rumming of Palestinians by a government that says the exact opposite. And there's somebody here on the panel today that's going to come up and probably dispute this, who's been on before. His name is Oad. And by the way, I will tell you, like I said before, I'm one of the few people that'll let somebody come up and speak without interrupting them and let them say their piece, as long as we can have a back and forth. And all I ask is that we be respectful towards each other, no name calling, no shouting, that kind of stuff. But there's a different narrative that gets told to people. It's not even their fault. They don't know any differently. They've not taken time to challenge their beliefs, like we said earlier today. And most people don't, by the way. They believe what they're told by their government or their side or their tribe they agree with, and that's that, which is unfortunate, but that is unfortunately what happens. So The information war, which is the bigger war at play long term, which is what I believe this whole thing was about in the beginning. I think whoever decided to do this was very smart. And everything has multiple reasons, right? I'm not going to say it's the only reason, but one of the benefits, as far as the horror show we're seeing, is that it did politically change the dynamics. How many people were talking about vying for Palestinians in September of this year? Very few of us, very few Americans knew about it, and other Westerners go about their business, right? I've been, as best I can, speaking out on it. You have a very limited reach as someone on Twitter, but if you go back and look at my Twitter feed, go back to September 5th, you'll see me talking about this issue. August, July, June. I've been talking about this for a long time. Okay, we have Hublal Khan coming on. Did I say it right? Hublai Khan.
Yeah. Say it Kublai, like as in Kublai.
Got it.
I
Got
was
it.
wildly optimistic. You know, there's hints of great hope in what you're saying, Chip. One of the most important points I think you just hit on is that populations, like the existing Jewish communities in the region, they do have rights. You know, and living people have rights. What doesn't have rights is things that aren't alive. Corporations don't have rights. Nation states and their borders don't have rights. Robots don't have rights. If you start allowing these things to claim rights, it's very quickly they're going to crowd out and erase the rights of living things. So when the USSR was breaking up or Yugoslavia was breaking up, nobody said that those countries had a right to stay on the map and could genocide people in order to make that more convenient, right? Instead, those countries were, they dissolved. And at the end of World War II, Nazi Germany had its borders rearranged and it had populations moved and things, and Imperial Japan also. So the 1948 Genocide Convention, the actual law that is in play right now at the ICJ, that law was written specifically to post facto justify all the things that were done to Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, right? All the things that the Truman administration and the Allies had done. Like they broke it up, they denazified Germany, they rearranged the constitution of Japan. They did all of that because in the post-war order, your sovereignty is conditional on human rights. You don't get to be a nation state if you have a genocidal racist supremacy ideology at all. And that was the decision in 48. People signed on to it. And the implication is that your sovereignty is conditional on meeting those standards. And now Israel is now in a very dangerous position as a state that its existence is conditional on meeting those standards. So if we talk about what could be thereafter, in contrast to, say, South Africa, I don't see a Mandela or a Tutu necessarily who could arrange that. But there are some models like a binational state, right? Like Belgium or Canada have two very different populations and cultures living in one nominal country that deals with the world as one country. But within that country, there's extremely strong autonomy for the Flemish and the Wallonians inside Belgium or for Quebec inside Canada. And essentially, they operate as a country in themselves, like Scotland also within the UK, also similarly, and to some degree, Wales. So there are constitutional models out there that could make domestic policy work pretty well in a post Israel Palestine. But obviously, if you're going to give up a secret stash of nuclear weapons and a bunch of armed settlers in locations that are probably going to have to evacuate, 750,000 is a lot of people, it seems like, but something like 1.1 million Israelis have already left the country by some reports. And when the French left Algeria, something like 2 million people were forced to move out of Algeria to France. So this kind of thing is thinkable if there are people who absolutely can't abide by becoming part of a unitary state. I'm wondering if you've heard something, Chip. There was an interview with Douglas Macgregor recently who said that his own intelligence from people through the region was that Arab leaders, not just the public who we know is strongly pro-Palestine, but the leaders have been saying that Sykes-Picot is over, kind of this ominous phrase that the post-World War I boundaries just drawn on the map by Britain are no longer operative. And what they want is an integrated Arab Muslim world where the crossroads is no longer blocked by this thing called Israel. And they wouldn't want it blocked by a unitary Palestine either if they couldn't, move trucks and people through it. So that idea of blocking the crossroads, which the Persians tried and the Romans tried and the British tried, of putting their own little puppet state there in order to block all the traffic between the Arab world, that seems to be failing again. It failed in the Crusades, it failed at many times in history. So if that population wants to survive there, I don't think it can survive as a bunch of, shall we say, toll takers or bandits at the crossroads. They have to be good citizens of the region, and that's what's hard to get to. And so maybe you can write a binational constitution. Israel was already negotiating constitutional change. It was already fighting over the roles of its court and how its basic law should work. So just writing a new constitution isn't that unthinkable. But the hard part is, how do you give up your secret nuclear weapon stash? How do you give up
Yeah.
your chosen people status? That's I wondered if you had a thought about this Sykes-Picot dissolving stuff, and how ominous does
Yeah.
that sound to you?
Yeah, those are good points. I follow Colonel Douglas McGregor. For those who don't know who Colonel Douglas McGregor was, he was a military advisor in the Trump administration. He's somebody who I admire. He's a former Army officer, understands military history very well, just like Scott Ritter does, very similarly. And controversial because, as someone said in the comments, they say he's a pro-Russia sympathizer, which I disagree with. And we can talk about the Ukraine war. There was somebody wanting to talk about that. We can get into that a little bit here. But as far as the Sykes-Picot go, for those who don't know what that is, the British and other Western powers pretty much decided to draw these artificial nation-state boundaries based on what many believe to be ways to keep the region unsettled, like to create chaos between different groups. It would make sense, for example, in Iraq, you have the Kurds in the north. You have different Shia and Sunni elements within the country. Why not have nation statehood be based on regional control of those who have homogeneity, like people that are more the same than not? But that's not the case. So they argue that these artificial borders of different nation states like Iraq and Jordan, they're all built on this idea of permanent instability, so that the Western powers can continue to colonize and control them based on the resources. So what Colonel McGregor is talking about is that the people that are in these nation states no longer, I mean, look at the governments of places that have been destroyed by the United States. There's no real national sovereignty of the Iraqi government. It's a joke. So the idea is get rid of the Western influences, let people control their own destiny, let them be free from imperial control, and let them draw their own boundaries and delineations based on what benefits them, not the Western powers. I agree, and I think the chaos that's been sown, especially in this situation, could be the beginning of the initiation of that fragmentation. And I think we're going to see more of that than less.
I would hope so. One of the things that I'm reminded of is when you actually look at interviews with Harry Truman and the map of compromise that he eventually approved as the state of Israel, which is more or less almost his personal decision, right? You can
Yeah.
see that the Arab areas are connected by crossover points. So you can actually have a kind of a crossroads where the Israelis can get to Israel and the Arabs can get to Palestine at kind of X's on the map where they're uh, like like literally crossovers. So in other words, the Arab world would not have been divided up under that plan. You would have been able to go from Damascus to Cairo as you always could without being disrupted. I heard Jimmy Carter talk about this also often, that was critical to relieving that anger and pressure on the Jewish community, that they not be physically blockading the ancient trade routes and so on. So but then again, that creates security challenges, right? Because if you can move trucks through, then you can also move soldiers through and so on. So this has been an active attempt to negotiate this forever, back at least to the Truman administration. And um, when that failed, when Nakba happened, and then the '48 war happened as a result of Nakba, in my opinion, you then have Israel occupying all those choke points and cutting off that trade and creating this long-term pressure now for 75 years where the Arab world can't trade with itself other than by going by sea and then being vulnerable to the Western Empire. Very clearly why the Western Empire likes that situation, right? So they're not going to give up that easily, that control of the oil and the trade in the Arab world. And the Arab world is never really going to give up its desire to have back the Damascus to Cairo connections. So this becomes a very intractable situation in which, perhaps as few as 5 million Jewish population in Israel is kind of at stake here. And the fate of those people is very much in doubt in any kind of war. And it's really, I don't think nuclear weapons are a deterrent. I think they're just a a danger, especially if it's a secret stash that could be used to false flag and we don't know who's really in control of it. So, ultimately the situation has to be defused somehow by somebody, and it's almost inevitably going to be the president of the United States job. And I'm not seeing people who are up to it even running for that job. What do you think?
Yeah, let's close on that. Thank you for your stuff. Yeah, let's answer that question. So, I mean, there's not a good landscape. If you're lobbying for this, you're advocating for this issue, and you're trying to figure out how to vote in the upcoming presidential election. I mean, you know, and there's no good choice. Let's face it. You have Donald Trump, who's ridiculously pro-Israel. I mean, to an absurd level. I mean, if you don't like the guy for anything else, don't like him for that. He's ridiculous. He's talking about trying to, basically crush anybody who supports, anybody on the Palestinian side. He's disgusting. Then you have Joe Biden, who seems to be completely inept, has no power. He's surrounded by a bunch of people with dual citizenship with Israel. He's an outspoken, ardent Zionist. That's a no-go for anybody. And then you have Bobby Kennedy Jr., who's completely off the reservation when it comes to this issue. I have no idea how, because he claims to be this intellectual that digs deep and finds the truth and can point out regulatory anomalies with companies that are able to distort the democratic process. But somehow, some way, he can't figure this one out. So maybe there's something else going on there, right? I don't know. Anyway, I don't think it looks good in any way, shape, or form. The key question right now is, does this blow up into a regional conflict, yes or no? Right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to. But it does. I get the feeling that if Israel keeps pushing, and it keeps pushing further and tries to marginalize and squeeze out Palestinians and annex all of Gaza, I don't think that will happen without some sort of intervention to some extent. I don't know if it's going to blow up into a full regional war or not. I don't know. Before we go on to the next guest, thanks for your patience. I just wanted to ask people kindly, there's two ways you can share a live. I didn't even know this. One is you can tap on somebody's head, which increases the likes. So if you don't mind doing that, please. But the other thing you can do is, let me point up here. You see my name up here, and it says there's a little baby heart under the C in my name chip. If you hold that for a second or two, a list will pop up of your friends, and then you can invite other people. I didn't know that. So if you could please do that, that's called sharing the live. So if you could tap to like and also share, we'll get some more people in here. Before we go to the next guest, and we don't have to shift topics too much, but I want to do a quick informal poll. Somebody was really emphasizing they want to hear more about Ukraine. So before we do that, and I won't switch it right away, but if you want to hear Ukraine, type in 1. If you don't want to go to Ukraine, type 0. Just informal poll. 1 for you want to hear about Ukraine, 0 you could care less. Or no, you don't want to hear about it now. And then based on that, I'll either include it or not. Because I know Palestine is the issue of the day right now, and a lot of people would rather focus on that because it's much more pressing, even though what's happening in Ukraine is equally tragic in terms of lives lost. Okay, so a lot of people are leaning towards not wanting to talk about it right now. Mello, again, if we kind of come through the loop of our conversation and we can squeeze it in, I have a lot of time today. I can go through this. So it's about maybe 70-30, 60-40, Palestine, no Ukraine versus do it. So we'll do the best we can to get to it. Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Okay, we have Hafid Alga. I can't read the rest of it. Hafid. Please
Can
come
I
on
ask
in.
you a few questions?
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Chip?
Hold on, Ohad. We're taking turns. I just let you know. I can only imagine how hard it is to wait when you hear people speaking about things you probably really disagree with. I understand that feeling. Trust me. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt. But we do have to go in order to be fair. So, Ohad, you're going to get your turn. I'm not going to ignore you, and we have plenty of time today, so you have that commitment. Please go ahead, Hafid.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chip, and I apologize, Mr. Ohad. I know you probably have something to say, and we've all been watching and hearing, and this is so interesting. And I'll tell you what, I live in Louisiana in America, and of course, a lot of people have the same exact issue that I have of not a lot of people actually want to discuss personal beliefs or personal opinions or have open minds or have open hearts. And that right there in itself, I think, is a problem, even though it goes against the doctrine of us as Americans, just to begin, with freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of hope and expression. And here in America, we're beginning to lose that. So I could only imagine what somebody who is facing, they say they have the number 3 military in the world. And I just want to just kind of sow So, just so we understand the kind of position that they're actually in, they say it's the number three military in the world, but I guarantee you, if there's so many lies and things, well, now I wouldn't just say lies, but if there's so many things that we do not know about in terms of capabilities, I guarantee you there are some things that we have never even heard about that they have and abilities to use them, and they're using them with full force and full capability, and I guarantee you that it's not even something that we could imagine how hard it is to be able to face the top most advanced uh, killing machine out there. So it's really hard on us to be able to speak about the truth. I know it's really, really hard for them, but I also just wanted to add to the fact that when he was mentioning Ukraine, I think that anytime you mention Palestine, you have to mention Ukraine as well, just because of the simple fact of people are losing their lives. It doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong, who said the yes, who said no, who agrees, who doesn't agree. People are losing their lives, and it's heart wrenching to see. It's horrible to be able to witness as a human being, and just uh, it's crazy to be able to watch so much war and so much violence and so much hate and corruption, even though we as Americans have seen this in World War One, we've seen this in World War Two. People beg not to go to war. We end up going into recession. Prices go up, food goes bad, but yet we wait until the last minute and then we say, oh, well, let's just not have a war. What's well? I'll tell you what, Ariel. That is a question. That is a good question, but I do want to let you know that uh, the kind of capabilities that they had 30 years ago, the government did not even allow for anybody to have ever known. So with our phones today, I could tell you this. They might have some kind of 5G that will track your phone completely and telegraph the entire room that you're in 3D wise. And the press that say they're going to monitor the killings of the people who are killing the Palestinians, when they say that they're actually the press trying to see what's going on, they're actually looking at where are all those who are the fighters, where's the food going. They give them a little bit of food, they try to hinch them out like birds. That's what they do. They take the press that is actually on the Israeli side and say that they're with the Palestinians recording what's all the killing about, but they're actually seeing where all the food is going, and in that way they get exposed. So what I'm trying to tell you is, like, the H word and the Israelis are on the same side against the Palestinian lives. Anyway, it's all a big hoax. They're depopulization the world. They're depopulating the world. Coronavirus didn't work, so now we have to go.
Oh, Chip, you're muted, Chip. We can't hear you.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, yeah, I'm all for free speech. Sorry about that to interrupt you, but there's certain things if we get into on TikTok, it can cause the live to get taken down for what they call misinformation. I'm not saying what you're saying is misinformation. I'm just letting you know the reality of this. So when you say things about, Depop you, whatever, and C19, et cetera, we can't go there. I wish we could. We can have a conversation like that on Rumble or a Zoom call. I'm happy to have it, but not here, okay? So if you want to use generalities, like there's an overall plan to do something in general, like to limit the number of people, so be it, but no details, okay? Sorry about that.
Okay, so it's a good point that I'm real glad that you understand where I'm coming from, Mr. Tripp.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that they call artificial intelligence. I find it funny that we have phones that are able to tell our exact heartbeats. And if they are able to tell our exact heartbeats and blood rates and all this other stuff, what kind of other abilities do they have? So what I'm saying is we need to be smart people in terms of how much we allow into our personal lives. And then we need to understand and to notice that our militaries are going to fight these wars, and we're not going to know what kind of. I mean, we live in the South, so there's the Mexican border problem, whatever. So for us as the American people, where is our military going and all of our tax money going? Why is it going out of the country? If something was to happen, we would have no kind of defenses here in this country. So it's actually a scary scene because, in some way, some form, if you're helping some kind of government, whatever what you call it, I mean, and there was the annual press conference they had in Russia. It was about they had Putin was talking about how some of these guys were asking, they were asking him, well, we need to get more drones and we need to get more this and we need to get more that. But what he was saying is, hey, the surveillance camera that you think I'm only using, and this was Putin to his guys in the military, he was telling them, the cameras that you think I'm using, we have a surveillance camera from the Iranians and from the Chinese. So what that shows is there's a lack of trust between the political leaders themselves and the commanders, because the problem is they're gonna go okay, who's to say that everybody that's getting called to war or on a call of duty, you could say, once these guys go out there, they go to war, there's no coming back. So I've spoken with a lot of military friends that I have here, and I live in Bossier City, Louisiana, next to Barksdale Air Force Base, which is the second biggest base in America. So a lot of people talk about how if we get into a war with Russia, that they would actually target Barksdale Air Force Base, and we are in the same city. So I tell people all the time who are in the base itself, how is it that they can allow us, take you away from us, you as a human being, as an American person. They want you to go to deploy, to go fight in a war that you don't know you're actually fighting you don't even know why you're gonna get into this war. And then what they're gonna do is they teach our children Pride Month, and you're not gonna be here to teach them otherwise. So how do you feel about paying all of our American dollars? I'm so sorry, Corey, but I just feel so.
Oh, Chip, my friend, you're muted again.
Sorry, I do that so I don't interrupt people and make too much noise. Yeah, sorry, but I don't mean to cut you off, but we have a lot of folks that are waiting, and I think you've made some good points. As far as the overall plan, like Plan 2030, hold on, dog. I get it. It's very worrisome, and if this does expand and people get drafted and that kind of thing, it's a big problem. But I don't want to elaborate more about that right now because there's a lot of unknowns in what you said. I don't know for sure what's going on with that, but thanks for raising those points. Those are legitimate questions to be asked. Okay, next person. I can't read that well outside, but I'll unmute you, please. How you doing, and what's on your mind?
I'm sharing. You could pass me off to because obviously I know Ohad is probably waiting. But I don't know if we're focusing more on the humanitarian side. Is that correct today, Chip? And thank you. A long time ago, you spoke to me, and I absolutely adore you. I do, and you look amazing. By the way, you look amazing. You do. You look amazing with the glasses and the jacket. I mean, come on. You look like you could be Secret Service. It's awesome. But allow Ohad I'll just be here for a second, but let him speak because I guess he's heard so much, and he has been patient, which has been very nice, and it's very calming here. So if you want, Ohad, you could speak.
So I want to ask a question.
Thank you.
If the answers can be concise and simple. So my first question is, who do you think have more rights, have more freedom from their governments, Israeli Arabs or the Palestinians?
So the question is, who has more rights from, quote, their government than Israeli Albert, it depends on which part of the Palestinian territory you're referring to.
Freedom from their governments, Israeli Arabs or Palestinian.
I guess just said a second ago, it depends on which part of the territories you're referring to. So there's a difference between how things are governed in the West Bank by the Palestinian Authority and how things are governed in Gaza by the H group. Which one are you referring to?
Focus on the H group because this is most of the war is right now.
Yeah, so obviously it's very clear that the structure of governance inside of the Gaza Strip is more authoritarian and less democratic than it is inside of Israel proper. So there's no point to be made there. I agree 100%.
So you agree that the Palestinians are oppressed by their own government, yeah?
I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that there's certain freedoms that exist in Israel that aren't available to people inside of Gaza. That's how I would say it.
So I talked to UNRWA teacher today via Telegram, and the thing that he said to me, and I quote, "It feels like we are being kidnapped. If we protest, we are being pupiled."
Who are you
This is what he
referring to?
said to me.
Professor, what area are you talking about inside of Gaza?
UNRWA. He is currently in Rafah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. There are other people in the comments.
I can send. I can if you want, you can message me, and I will give you the entire transcript.
That's fair. I said I didn't know if it's true or not. That's what I said, or not. So I have no reason to deny what you're saying, but I have no ability to confirm it. The problem with written testimony or verbal testimony is that it's third party, whereas I like to believe things that are direct. Hey, hold on, my dog's freaking the hell out here. I'm trying to put my gloves on. So yeah, I don't know for sure. If you want to send me something, my email is inside of my link tree. You're welcome to do that. But again, there's a lot of things being said by both sides that are very hard to verify. The stuff that I have evidence for, like as far as literally video evidence, that's the part that I have a hard time refuting because it actually, video speaks for itself.
Okay. And if we wanted to talk about video evidence, I can only give you a few examples, like the one when the H group basically stole the aid trucks, and then a Palestinian child tried to get to the truck and got pupiled, and then there was even riots because of that in some parts.
But that's
Please don't cut me off.
I'll tell you what. Let me do that. But let me just. So here's what I want to do. To have a hearty debate about this, I want to let I discuss this. But here's what I would like you all to do if you could. Give each other like 30 seconds and then politely stop and let somebody respond. Same thing. Then you stop, blah, blah, blah. If you guys don't, I'll jump in and mute and we'll go from there. But let me let Ohad finish his point, and then Ohad, please kindly let Abir answer.
Okay, so one more question and then I will get to my point. Would you support the change of government for the Palestinians?
Well, what I'll do is I'll answer that, and then I want to let Amir answer what you said prior to that. Just I think she wanted to point something out. I would say this. In terms of deciding who gets to govern whom, I think each individual group of people has the right to determine that for themselves. Now, I understand the security concerns. This is what's fair. The Israelis have legitimate security concerns such that they don't want to have things happen as what happened on the 7th. I think that's very legitimate. And in fact, going after the people who perpetrated that is also legitimate. I think what the world is seeing that they feel badly about is the disproportionate response and the inordinate impact it's had on the civilian population.
Yeah, but this is exactly what I want to go to.
Let me finish. I'm almost done.
Because right now...
You asked me a question. I got to finish the answer. So the answer is I understand the security concerns. So I think the goal is to allow one side to have their autonomy to decide how to manage their internal affairs, and at the same time accompanying that with security guarantees. But, and here's the part I think you need to understand, Ohad, that people are missing. The but part is this, and I don't want to give a terribly long answer, but as long as there's going to be an occupation and a military blockade of any people, doesn't matter if it's Palestinians or Ethiopians, they're going to want to push back. So as long as those frameworks remain in place, it's very impossible to expect somebody to behave differently, and you hold them to a different standard than you would want to be held if it were you that were under the same conditions.
What I want to make is that to change the government, and a lot of them do. Okay, a lot of them hate the age group, absolutely hate the age group, but they can't do much about it because they're oppressed by the age group. So an election, for example, is out of the question. There weren't an election in Gaza for 18 years. So what I'm getting at is that if they try to remove the age group, what would you think the cost of lives would be? And then relate this to the cost of life right now. Because we've seen what happens in Syria. We have seen how many people Assad have unalived.
Okay, let me do this. Before I answer that question, I'm going to let Abir respond to either that or what you just said there. Let me see what Abir has to say about those two things. Yeah, that's fine. I'd be happy to. Yeah, that may work. If you leave the live and come back, that may make it better. Oh, I know her quite well. Yeah, I know her quite well. Here she comes. All right, let me do this. Let me go back inside. And this happened last time I walked outdoors. It caused the live to have a problem, unfortunately. So, can everybody hear Chip? Can you hear me, the host? If you can hear me, can you please type the number 1 or say yes? Okay. And can everybody hear both the host and the guest speaking? Can you please say yes? Yeah, I just dropped her. She just dropped again a beer. So I'm not seeing the comments flow through either. That's unfortunately. Yeah, let me do this. Let me drop because I am outside right now. Sometimes the Wi-Fi will not let it. Well, if I change it from Wi-Fi to cellular, it won't work. But let's see if it works. Okay, let me do this. I'm gonna have to restart the live. I hate to do this, but if I don't restart the live, we're gonna have the same problem the whole way through. Okay, thanks.